Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about the Flexitarian Diet today, which is an eating strategy for just promoting long-term health. So let's jump right in. So first of all, I want to give an overview of just the things that we are going to be talking about today. So we're going to start with just a general definition of what the Flexitarian Diet is, some principles of the Flexitarian Diet and components of it, why we should care about the Flexitarian Diet, some of the benefits of the Flexitarian Diet, food sources of the Flexitarian Diet, and then we want to talk about some nutrition deficiencies that are often found and just to be aware of as you think about implementing the Flexitarian Diet. And then we'll talk about how you can start implementing the Flexitarian Diet. So to start, what is the Flexitarian Diet? So ultimately, this diet is going to promote a plant-based lifestyle with an occasional meat or fish consumption. So we really want to emphasize here that it is what it is called. It's flexible. And that's the whole point of the flexitarian diet. So it's going to promote eating plants like vegetables and fruits and beans and legumes. But it's also adaptable to fit your needs and your lifestyle. So say you are super busy all the time and for you, a flexitarian diet is easiest if you plan to eat meat when you go out to eat, and maybe when you're at home, you say, okay, I'm going to focus on eating only plant-based foods. It's not an elimination of meat, it's simply a decrease in your consumption of meat. So it could look like only eating meat when you go out to eat. It could mean only eating meat once a day, or just simply lowering your portions of meat. It's very flexible, and we really want you to adapt this to what's best for you. So some principles of the flexitarian diet, or should I say, these are 5 food groups that the flexitarian diet really emphasizes and wants you to get a good amount of. So that's going to be fruits and vegetables, legumes or beans, whole grains, and then dairy products. And then the flexitarian diet does seek to eliminate or limit the amount of added sugars and saturated fats that you consume. And then, of course, we want to lower our amount of meat. So that's everything from red meat, fish, pork to poultry. And again, just to emphasize, this is not a complete elimination of these foods. Simply, we want to lower our consumption of these foods. And so all of these foods, the reason why we want to lower these foods is because they have inflammatory properties in the body. And so we're going to talk about that more on this next slide. So when we eat foods like saturated fats and added sugars, and when we have a prolonged high intake of meat, it's going to result in inflammation within the body. And inflammation within the body is going to have an effect of these symptoms right here. So things like fatigue, mood disorders, skin problems, weight changes, gastrointestinal issues, joint pain and stiffness, and redness and swelling. And so why should we care about the flexitarian diet? Well, animal protein is incredibly beneficial and a great source of fat, protein, and micronutrients. We see that when we have a very high intake of animal protein or meat, and we have a long-term consumption of meat, these things are associated, or this intake is associated with high inflammation, which then has a cascade effect and encourages the development of chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and weight gain. So again, just to emphasize, this is not an elimination of animal protein because animal protein does have a really great source of nutrients. However, we do see with the high intake and with a long-term consumption of meat, it is associated with inflammation, which then can cause these chronic diseases. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to each one of these chronic diseases that is a result of inflammation. And we're going to look at how the flexitarian diet prevents or either helps in the treatment of these diseases. So to start, let's talk about heart disease or cardiovascular disease. So the flexitarian diet is going to help support the heart because of its emphasis on vegetables and fruits and beans and legumes. All of these foods can be broken down into compounds that are known as vasodilators. And vasodilators work by opening up the blood vessels, which then increases your blood flow, which prevents plaque from forming. It prevents clogged arteries. And then also, vegetables contain a really high amount of potassium. So if you have really high blood pressure, that potassium is going to help counteract any excess sodium that could be present in your body. And then we'll talk more about dietary fiber, but fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and legumes have a really high amount of dietary fiber. And so dietary fiber will bind to the cholesterol in the small intestines, and it's going to prevent that cholesterol from going into the bloodstream, which then can form plaque in your arteries and ultimately cause things like strokes or heart disease. Next, we want to talk about how the flexitarian diet helps in the treatment or prevention of type 2 diabetes. So again, these plant-based foods and a high intake of plant-based foods have a really low glycemic index. And so what that means is they release glucose slowly into the bloodstream, and that prevents a spike of your blood sugar and then a crash that could potentially happen. So inflammation in the body has a cascade effect, which can eventually lead to insulin resistance. So when we focus our diet on more plant-forward foods, it can cause a slower rate of digestion, which then decreases this release of glucose and will lower the surge of blood sugar that could potentially happen if you're eating especially a lot of carbohydrate-rich foods and things like that. Also, a diet that's really rich in vegetables and grains and legumes contains a lot of essential nutrients that can help regulate your blood sugar. So let's move on to the next slide. So next, let's talk about cancer and how the flexitarian diet is beneficial in the prevention and treatment of cancer. So as we already have talked about, when inflammation occurs in the body, specifically we are talking about inflammation that occurs through the intake of saturated fats, added sugars, and a very high consumption of meat for a long period of time. This inflammation can cause abnormal cell growth, and it causes damage to genetic materials. And that's ultimately what cancer is. It's abnormal cell growth and damage to genetic material. So plant-based foods, or vegetables, whole grains, nuts, legumes, they contain things called antioxidants and phytochemicals. And these antioxidants and phytochemicals help to prevent against the cell mutations, the DNA damage that occurs and potentially can lead to cancer. So I want to talk a little bit more about this antioxidant effect of vegetables and fruits. And so these antioxidant compounds that are found in foods work by being a protective, by protecting the cell. And so it protects against the oxidative damage that occurs when our bodies are exposed to free radicals, which ultimately causes the cell damage. And so that's why it's important to make sure that you're getting a good amount of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, because these antioxidants that are found in them, specifically, I would say in fruits and vegetables, work as a protective measure against cell damage that can occur from inflammation and free radicals. So again, just to emphasize, diets that are high in processed foods, trans fats, and sugars are going to be linked to inflammation and stress. And then a diet that is rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and specifically omega-3 fatty acids, which we will talk more about later, those are going to be considered anti-inflammatory and protective. And then lastly, I want to talk about weight management and how the flexitarian diet can aid in managing your weight. So as we've already talked about, the flexitarian diet really supports and promotes a high consumption of fruit and vegetables. And fruit and vegetables contain really high amounts of fiber. And so fiber is going to it has a bulking effect. And so that's going to help slow down your digestion. It's going to help increase your fullness level or your satiety, which is ultimately going to support a decrease in intake of higher calorie foods and also help with the weight loss. So I want to talk a little bit more about fiber because obviously fiber is crucial in so many aspects in both physical properties, hormonal influences. It's really great, important to your gut health and psychological health. And also the flexitarian diet really supports a fiber-rich diet. So all of those 5 principles of the flexitarian diet, the fruits and vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and dairy, specifically whole grains, legumes, fruits, and vegetables, all have really high amounts of fiber. So let's talk a little bit about the physical properties of fiber. So specifically, fiber, as we've already kind of mentioned, has this bulking effect. So there are 2 types of fiber. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And insoluble fiber is going to work by absorbing water, which causes a swell in the stomach, and that's going to fill up space and also trigger receptors in your brain to tell you, hey, I'm full and I should stop eating. It's also both soluble and insoluble fibers are going to work by slowing down the process of digestion, which is going to make you feel fuller for a lot longer because it's not just flying through your digestive system. So let's talk about some hormonal benefits to fiber. So when fiber is being digested, when it reaches the small intestines, it's going to ferment and it's going to produce something called short-chain fatty acids. And basically, what short-chain fatty acids do is they signal to your brain this feeling of fullness, like we mentioned earlier. So again, that's just going to tell you as you're eating, this fiber-rich food is going to reach your small intestines, it's going to produce short-chain fatty acids, it's going to signal to your brain, and so as you're eating, you're going to be able to tell, hey, I'm full and I should stop eating. It's also going to stimulate the release of other hormones that play a role in signaling satiety to the brain and fullness and all of those things. Next, let's talk about fiber and gut health. So we already mentioned kind of the physical mechanisms of fiber. They slow down digestion. So are really high in carbohydrates. Sometimes that can cause a rapid spike in blood glucose, which gives you a lot of energy really quickly. And then maybe in a few hours, you have this sudden drop of blood sugar, and that's going to cause hunger pangs. And I don't know if some of you ever get hangry or know the term hangry, where you get so hungry and you're like, I just have to have food right now. Sometimes that's because of a really sharp decrease in your blood sugar levels. And so fiber, or eating fiber-rich foods along with things like carbohydrates or those foods that might spike your blood sugar levels a little bit more, fiber is going to help maintain those blood sugar levels. It's going to help slow down the absorption of those carbohydrates, which is going to lead to a more gradual increase in your blood sugar and then a more gradual decrease in your blood sugar. Also, fiber is going to just support a healthy gut flora. So there's good bacteria in the gut, and then there is bad bacteria in the gut. And eating a fiber-rich diet is going to really help support that good bacteria in the gut, which is going to help support your weight management and your appetite control, because the good bacteria in your gut can help support a lot of really great mechanisms. And then the bad bacteria is going to really promote mechanisms that maybe aren't so helpful to your overall well-being. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with something called irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disease. And so we want to talk a little bit about how a high fiber diet is really influential in this disease or syndrome. So irritable bowel syndrome is characterized by just inflammation in the gut. There are various symptoms of just irregular bowel movements and pain after eating, and sometimes you have gastric reflux associated with irritable bowel syndrome. So a plant-based diet that's really high in fiber is really beneficial in supporting or treating or preventing this from occurring. There's no really known cure for irritable bowel syndrome, and there's no really known cause. We do know that it is caused by inflammation, and where the inflammation comes from really is dependent on the person and the case, and there's not a known specific cause. And so studies have shown, though, that a diet that's really rich in plant-based foods, such as the Flexitarian diet, which has all the components of fruits and vegetables, whole grains and beans, that those foods all reduce inflammation in the gut, like we've been talking about. And since inflammation is such a common symptom of IBS, or we do know that it's one of the major causes of IBS, we can conclude that the Flexitarian diet, especially with it being such a high fiber diet, can really help support your gut, which helps regulate your bowel movements and improve your gut bacteria, your good gut bacteria, and just your overall gut health. And then lastly, we want to talk about the psychological benefits to a high fiber diet. So consuming these high fiber foods is going to be a little bit more taxing on the mechanical side. So it's going to require you to chew more. These high fiber foods are a little bit more bulky, a little more fibrous, sometimes more dense. And so that's ultimately going to slow down the rate of your eating, which is going to allow more time for your body to recognize, hey, like I'm eating, I should maybe get ready to digest some food. And then also, as you're eating, because you're eating at a slower rate, is going to allow for more time for your body to get those signals and those hormones to the brain to tell you, hey, I'm full, I should stop eating. Also, it's just going to help promote more mindful eating. As you slow down your eating, it's going to help you implement more, just more thinking more about what you eat. I think we oftentimes can get so busy, and it's so easy to be like, oh, I have 30 minutes for lunch, I've got to eat super, super fast. And so when you implement higher fiber foods, things that are more whole and unprocessed, it can really help you to take more time to think about what you're eating, to enjoy it, and to slow down just eating in general. So we talked about how the Flexitarian diet really supports an increase in dietary fiber and the benefits to that in our health. And we talked about how it increases our antioxidants and how that's beneficial in preventing chronic disease and specifically cancer. And so we also want to talk about how it increases our HDL cholesterol and decreases total and LDL cholesterol and our saturated fat. So let's talk a little bit more about HDL cholesterol and LDL cholesterol. So HDL cholesterol and LDL cholesterol are two types of lipoproteins, and they work by transporting cholesterol through the bloodstream. But HDL cholesterol is often referred to as our good cholesterol, while our LDL cholesterol or lipoproteins are known as our bad cholesterol. So, as I've already said, HDL is often referred to as good cholesterol. And so basically, how HDL works is it removes cholesterol from the bloodstream and transports it to the liver for either excretion, excretes it out of the body, or either it reuses it. So high levels of HDL are generally going to be associated with a lower risk of heart disease. And the way this works is HDL, since it's removing cholesterol from the arterial walls, it's going to help reduce the buildup of cholesterol, which then turns into plaque and atherosclerosis. So it's going to really help that plaque formation, which then, as blood flow occurs, can cause bursting and all sorts of things, which will cause strokes and heart disease, and we don't want that. So HDL really supports a healthy heart. And so some good examples of how to incorporate HDL into your diet is going to be found in food sources such as nuts and seeds, whole grains, beans or legumes, and soy foods. And again, we can see all of those are things that the Flexitarian diet really encourages and really supports a high intake of. And then there's LDL cholesterol. So that again is known as your bad cholesterol. So LDL also transports cholesterol, except it doesn't transport it to be reused. It transports it from the liver to go to the cells throughout the body. And so that is supporting the buildup of cholesterol in these arteries. So it's ultimately supporting plaque formation and atherosclerosis and increasing your risk of heart disease and stroke. And it's going to deposit that cholesterol in the arterial walls. It's going to form plaque. And yeah, some foods that are going to be really high in LDL cholesterol are going to be things like red meat, full fat dairy products, fast foods and desserts, and really high sugar foods. So let's talk a little bit about some healthy HDL sources of fats that are really good for supporting heart health and just overall well-being, specifically omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. They're a type of polyunsaturated fats, and they're called essential fatty acids. And the reason why they're called essential is because the body cannot produce them on their own. And that means they must be obtained through your diet. So you have to eat them in your diet in order to get them. And they're incredibly important and incredibly beneficial to our overall health. And we're going to talk a little bit about that on the next slide. So omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3 fatty acids are going to be really beneficial for your heart health, for your brain function, and they're ultimately going to have anti-inflammatory properties. Some good food sources of omega-3 fatty acids are going to be things like flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, salmon, beans, leafy greens. All of those are going to be really great ways of implementing omega-3 fatty acids into your diet. And then we have omega-6 fatty acids, and it has a lot of the similar benefits, specifically on cell function, skin health. It's going to help maintain your bone health, regulate your metabolism, and also support your brain function. Some great sources of omega-6 fatty acids, or some good ways to implement those into your diet, are going to be through vegetable oils, like soybean, corn, olive oil, avocado oil, nuts, eggs, and seeds. Those are going to be the primary sources of omega-6 fatty acids. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of a flexitarian diet and the ways that it's going to help support your health and reduce inflammation. And so we want to talk a little bit more about the sources of food that help support and give you the nutrients you need for a balanced diet, especially if you're implementing the flexitarian diet. So protein is essential for building and repairing tissue. It's going to help support muscle growth and maintain your overall health. It's a very vital component of a balanced diet. And again, here on the slide, I want to emphasize again, animal protein is a great source of protein, and it contains tons of great nutrients. And so we want to encourage you Again, with the name of this diet, Flexitarian diet, it doesn't mean a complete elimination of animal protein. Simply limit your protein and decrease the amount of animal protein that you're eating because of the inflammatory properties that it has with a high intake for a long-term amount of time. But we also want to give you some good sources of protein that maybe aren't animal sources, because sometimes I think when we think of protein, we think automatically of animal sources of protein, or specifically meat. But there are other animal sources of protein that are not meat, and so those are listed here. Things like cottage cheese and Greek yogurt. Eggs are such a great source of protein and nutrients and healthy fats. Things like cheese and milk and beans are also a really great source of protein. Next are whole grains. So whole grains are a great source of fiber. So think about all of those benefits to fiber that we talked about earlier. They're also going to contain vitamins and minerals that are really great. They're going to promote heart health and aid in our digestion and contribute to sustained energy levels and prolonged satiety or fullness. So some good sources of whole grains are going to be things like oatmeal and whole wheat bread and brown rice. So I also just want to mention here that these are really easy substitutions. Say you usually buy or purchase white bread. Maybe you could purchase whole wheat bread instead, or perhaps you usually use white rice. You could implement using brown rice instead. Next is non-starchy vegetables. So non-starchy vegetables are going to be low in calories, but they have so many essential vitamins and minerals, and they're going to, again, help support that satiety. And overall, they're going to help reduce your risk of chronic diseases. Just again, think back to all those benefits of the fiber and the prolonged mechanical structure, or like the mechanical it's going to cause you to chew more and things like that, eating foods like this. And so it's going to help just promote your mindfulness and all of that as you're eating. So some good sources of non-starchy vegetables are going to be things like greens, bell peppers, Brussels sprouts, green beans, carrots, and cauliflower. Starchy vegetables are going to provide a good source of complex carbohydrates. So it's going to help promote and provide long-lasting energy and also nutrients. And so some good sources of starchy vegetables are going to be things like squash, corn, and sweet potatoes or regular white potatoes as well. And then fruits. Fruits are what some people like to refer to as nature's gifts because they are packed with so many vitamins. They have so many of those antioxidants which help prevent against cell damage and also have a really high amount of fiber. And so these are going to help boost your immune system, aid in digestion, and reduce the risk of chronic disease. And they're so yummy, and they add a little sweetness to your diet. So they're a really great food source. And then we want to talk about beverages. So it's so incredibly important to stay hydrated and just overall that helps support your well-being. And beverages and drinks in general help maintain optimal functions and they aid in digestion. And also a lot of beverages can support the intake of a lot of calories, or either they can reduce the intake of these calories. And so here are some beverage options that we would like to encourage you to think about drinking. So if you like sodas a lot, maybe substituting your soda for sparkling water to still give you that carbonation. Things like tea have a lot of good antioxidant catechins, things that help in decreasing inflammation and protecting your cells. Coffee, almond or soy milk is a really great source of it's a really good way to get calcium in and things like that without maybe taking full fat dairy if that's not something you want to do. It's a lower calorie option. So yeah, we want to really just encourage you to stay hydrated and really get all your water in, and these are some good sources and ways to do that. So next we want to talk about some nutrient deficiencies that are associated with the flexitarian diet. So we've talked about all these health benefits and things that are associated with just an increase in vegetables and fruits and legumes and whole grains. But we also want to mention that there are a few nutrient deficiencies that people who eat a really plant-forward diet can sometimes develop. And so we just want you to be aware of these things. It's nothing to be fearful of. It's just something to keep in mind as you think about implementing the flexitarian diet. So specifically, vitamin B12. So vitamin B12 is very, very common amongst plant-based eaters. And so it has 4 functions. It's going to help form red blood cells and DNA. It's going to help transport oxygen to vital organs. It's going to play a role in producing serotonin and in energy production. And so when you're not getting enough of vitamin B12, then you're obviously not going to be able to make red blood cells and DNA. Your body is going to struggle to transport oxygen to vital organs, which is going to lead to fatigue and weakness. And it also increases your risk for anemia. And it also can affect your mood because it's not able to produce as much serotonin. And it's going to have an effect on your energy. So the recommended dietary allowance for vitamin B12 is 2.4 micrograms. And so it's just something to be aware of, that's kind of the recommended amount they say you should get. And there are some really easy ways that you can implement B12 into your diet through either fortified foods or you can take a vitamin B12 supplement. Some good food sources, though, for vitamin B12 are going to be things like eggs, dairy products, milk, yogurt, cheese, all really great non-meat protein sources as well. Fortified nutritional yeast and breakfast cereals as well. Those are going to be great sources of vitamin B12 if you prefer not to take a supplement. And then iron and zinc is another, some other vitamins to be aware of. So iron is going to be essential to carrying oxygen and making hormones. And then zinc is going to be really helpful in DNA synthesis, the growth of your cells, and building protein, and supporting your immune system, and healing your damaged tissue. So obviously we can see iron and zinc have a really, really important role in various mechanisms throughout your body. And also I would just want to mention iron and zinc kind of go hand in hand with B12. And so all of these together are just things to be aware of as they all kind of contribute to carrying oxygen and iron and all of those things. So some good sources of iron and zinc are going to be nuts and seeds, whole grains, and beans or legumes. And then we do want to mention some ways to enhance your iron absorption. So when you consume vitamin C rich foods, so things like strawberries and bell peppers and broccoli, that is going to help increase your iron absorption. If you cook in a cast iron skillet or any type of cast iron cookware, that's going to help increase the absorption of iron in your food. And then we want to mention that when you are consuming iron-rich foods, it's important to avoid foods like foods that contain tannins or calcium. So tannins can be found in tea and coffee, and then calcium would be really present in dairy sources, but specifically calcium supplements, if you're taking those, just avoid those when you're consuming iron-rich foods because those can sometimes prevent the absorption of iron. And then calcium, just be aware of a calcium deficiency or just lower levels of calcium when you are eating a diet that's really, really high in fruits and vegetables. Because calcium plays a role in blood clotting, muscle contraction, hormone regulation, and your bone health. So calcium obviously has a really important role as well in the body. Some good sources of calcium are going to be things like bok choy and kale, sesame seeds. Almond milk is a great source of calcium, and all of those are plant-forward foods as well. And the recommended dietary allowance for calcium is going to be 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day, so that's just a good number to keep in mind as you evaluate your calcium intake. So next, we want to talk about the role of the flexitarian diet on the environment. So it obviously has incredible benefits to our health, but we also think it's important to support the environment. And so we're going to talk about each one of these a little bit more in detail. So specifically, the flexitarian diet helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So animal agriculture, specifically cattle farming, contributes to greenhouse gases, specifically in the production of methane and carbon dioxide. So when you reduce your meat consumption, you are helping to support the lowering of these greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to help reduce, the flexitarian diet is going to help reduce land and water usage. So with meat production, especially beef production, it's going to require a lot of water. And that actually, many people are not aware that the production of meat oftentimes requires more water than growing plants. And so when you prioritize fruits and vegetables in your diet, it's going to help lead to a significant reduction of water usage. Meat production also requires a lot of land because you have to raise your animals and you have to help them grow by feeding them. And so when you reduce your red meat consumption, specifically red meat consumption, it can decrease the pressure on your land resources, and it allows for more sustainable land use. So it's important to keep in mind. And then the flexitarian diet is going to help promote just a reduced pollution and eutrophication. So again, we've talked about how animal farming is a major source of water and air pollution. This is specifically due to fertilizers and pesticides that is used for feeding the crops and due to the water or the waste that's produced by the animals. And so when you reduce your meat consumption, it's going to lead to lower levels of this agricultural pollution. And then lastly, the flexitarian diet is going to help promote biodiversity. So when you have large-scale animal farming, often it can lead to habitat destruction, which ultimately threatens biodiversity. So when you shift towards a more plant-based diet, it's going to help preserve those natural habitats and also protect lots of various species. So with that, we want to talk a little bit more practically about how you can begin the flexitarian diet. So we've talked about all the benefits, we've both in the environment and to us personally. So let's talk about what this actually looks like on a practical level. So again, I've mentioned it many times, but I think it's really important for us to grasp this. We really want to support eating lots and lots of vegetables and eating fruits and eating healthy fats like olive oils and nut butters and seeds and avocados, and incorporating lots of whole grains into your diet for added fiber and increased satiety and fullness. All of those things we really, really want to support. And those are going to help decrease inflammation in your body, decrease your risk of chronic diseases, and support your overall well-being. And then we also want to begin to eat smaller amounts of meat. This does not mean eliminating meat from your diet. This does not mean never eating meat again. I need to go vegetarian. This is not called vegetarian. It's called flexitarian because it's flexible. And so just to emphasize again, maybe that means eating meat once a day for you. Maybe that means just simply decreasing your portion size of meat. Maybe it means eating meat only when you go out to eat. It can be very different for every single one of you and adaptable to your lifestyle. But we really do want to focus on also getting really great sources of vegetables and whole grains and fruits and healthy fats. And then we want to minimize the consumption of refined carbs and processed meats like bacon and sausage and added sugars and fast foods. And so just some practical ways that this could look like for you is maybe instead of eating, again, white bread or white rice, maybe substitute those for a whole grain option. And maybe instead of eating as many sweets and desserts, maybe implementing more fruits in your diet could be really helpful to still give you that sweet taste, but it doesn't have quite the same inflammatory response on your body. And then say you're at a party or you're really busy and you need to grab something at a restaurant really quick for lunch that day, and you're kind of thinking, okay, how do I eat in a way that promotes my health and my well-being, but also like I'm really busy and I haven't had time to really think through it a lot. We like to kind of have this simple rule of thumb for how to build a balanced plate. So say you're at a party and there's a big buffet and there's so many options of food and it's very overwhelming and you think, oh, there it goes. Like I can't, I'm obviously just not going to be healthy today. Everything in balance, and you can still really support your health even in those types of moments. And so just some simple rule of thumbs is making half of your plate fruits and vegetables, having 25% or a quarter of your plate that contains a good source of grains or just grains in general. Maybe they don't have whole grains at the party, and that's okay. And then 25% of your plate containing a source of protein, whether that's animal protein from meat or animal protein from dairy or like eggs, or beans or a plant source of protein, and then 2 to 3 cups of dairy per day is kind of what we, some simple guidelines for how to support your health. And then lastly, we want to kind of give you an example of what a regular diet or standard diet may look like versus how it would look for you to implement the flexitarian diet, and kind of like give you a day in the life of someone who is trying to implement a flexitarian diet. So typically you may have buttered toast with eggs and bacon, and then say on a flexitarian diet, you would change your butter toast to a whole grain toast, and you'd add some avocado and a poached egg on top. For lunch, you may typically have a steak burrito with rice and beans, but in a flexitarian mindset, you would have a burrito bowl with brown rice and some beans for protein and some vegetables, which are going to have lots of fiber, increase your fullness and your satiety, and give you lots of good vitamins and minerals. And then for dinner, you might typically have a cheeseburger with a side of fries. On the flexitarian diet, you could try making black bean burgers, and you could have a side salad with it. You could also bake some potatoes or some sweet potatoes and make your own sweet potato french fries or something like that. That would be a really great option as well. So that is all I have for you. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope this gives you some really great ideas for how you can implement more of a flexitarian mindset into your daily life and ultimately support your overall health and well-being by increasing your fruits and your vegetables and your whole grains and all of that. So let me know if anyone has any questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.